point out is that change is accelerating. The world is changing at a very rapid pace. Um, and that accelerate change comes from the fact that things are speeding us, but also globalization has made things much more global. So the impact is global, and social media has enabled change to reach at individual level. And also, we learned from the United Nations, the change now tends to be simultaneous as well. So the hurricanes come in three or four, not once as they used to come. When a crisis comes, it comes with many components. A good example is COVID-19. When COVID-19 came, it was not just a health problem, but it was also international travel problem. It was a shopping problem. It was a displacement problem. It was a mental issue because people were in their houses. It was a religious problem because nobody went to Hajj or couldn't go to Hajj and so on and so forth. So the problems tend to have multiple dimensions. And all of this is because of three C's, is that the world is becoming more complex and interconnected. When you have things which are very complex and interconnected, you have feedback loops. And when you have feedback loops, you have chaotic events. So more and more chaos is happening. But also if you have complexity and interconnection, you have contradictions, repositions, different people fighting for different causes, taking us in different directions. So the three C's is what is how we kind of understand change, or how me and my group try to understand change in terms of complexity, contradictions, and chaos. And we call it post-normal times, because essentially what it means is that the old paradigms, the old normal, however it is defined, whoever defines it, is no longer valid. We are in an in-between period where the old paradigms are dying, but nothing new has taken its place. And therefore, we are in a kind of unstable period where nothing seems to make sense and things are becoming more and more extreme because of chaotic events. A good example is Trump election. Another example would be the rise of fascism in Europe. All these things that we thought are past, in fact, are in a way coming back because of the chaos of contemporary times. All of this, it means that we have to have a much better understanding about our futures, of how our futures come about, what's going to happen in the next 5-10 years. Also, it's becoming more and more difficult to actually do any forecasting, because most of the forecasting and because things change so rapidly, don't turn out to be correct. But a good knowledge of how events or trends are unfolding becomes more and more important. And this is one reason why UNESCO now is pushing for futures literacy in all universities and secondary schools. And some countries have already adopted this policy. And you go to the UNESCO website, you can find lots of stuff about futures literacy. Futures literacy, that all students have to learn, all people who are educated have to have education in how futures unfold, what is potentially likely to happen in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right? How we study trends, how we spot emerging issues. So yesterday, most of the slides that I showed you, they were about emerging issues, the issues which are just underneath the radar, but they may become very big in the next 5 to 10 years. So the ability to spot emerging issues, ability to develop scenarios, all that now becomes essential for because they will inhabit a future which should be radically different from the present, given the rate of change. So was essentially a lot of that you can just find out from visiting Post-Normal Time website, which is postnormal, one word, then TIM, it's all one word, .es. Postnormal, TIM.es. You find lots of stuff, lots of papers. There are 2 or 3 readers. There's a Post-Normal Times Reader Volume 1 and a Post-Normal Reader Volume 2. There's a book on how knowledge production is changing and how the nature of knowledge itself is going to be totally transformed. It's called Emerging Epistemologies, the changing fabric of knowledge in post-normal times, how knowledge itself is transforming. and how ignorance and complexity are now becoming an integral part of knowledge production.
Yeah, so I think we discussed that yesterday for sure. Some of us were present, and I think what I was hoping for is if we could like dig in a little bit deeper rather than do a broader, begin onto the idea of doing Muslim history,
Yeah.
the history of Muslim Islamic science, and those kind of the intersections. That would be lovely.
But that's just for what what we were talking about. But summary of what we thought about yesterday. This that everything has to be deconstructed, that everything has to be kind of shown to be meaningless at the end, and it's kind of perpetual doubt and perpetual criticism. That is not the way we define criticism. We are defining criticism in the old-fashioned way of looking at something and exploring it. So for us, criticism is something that takes an object wherever it is and places it at a higher level. Right? So the criticism is engagement with the object. It's not about denigration. It's not about knocking the subject of the object down, but it's about raising the level of the subject and the object to a higher. So, for example, if somebody critiques a painting, um, what they're actually doing is to showing the depth of the painting and what else it says apart from what's on the what's on the canvas, in a sense. So that we mean uh, 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 that's the over definition of criticism. Many of these words traditionally have existed, but in contemporary times they've been kind of rebranded, given real different meanings. So although we do a lot of conventional critical theory stuff, in the sense that deconstruction of knowledge, looking at knowledge production, etc. But in general, the way we define criticism is you take an object and a subject and you enhance it. You make it shining. So it's like you may have an object that is the rough diamond, and you polish it and shine it and make it into a shining diamond. That's the way we. So our object. But criticism can be quite deep and quite severe, but it's not necessarily destructive. We are not in a destructive kind of game. So that's what we mean by critical. What do we mean by Muslim? Now, there are, of course, various kind of Muslims. We can look into from the sectarian perspective. We can look at from the school of thought perspective. We can look at from a historical perspective. We can look at all sorts of kind of different aspects. Practicing perspective. That practicing perspective. Somebody said, pointing out yesterday that I am not a very spiritual person. I said, fine. Somebody else says I may not be good Muslim because I smoke cigars. I go, then I smoke cigars. That's fine too. And so we reject the notion that there is only one kind of Muslim. Right. That's the first thing. Right. We reject the notion that there is only one kind of Muslim. And we believe that every kind of Muslim deserve their own respect, right? So we would not, for example, say like some Sunni Muslims say the Shias are not very good, or Shias are not, or Ahmadis are not Muslim, etc. So that's the first thing. We accept all varieties of Muslim, and provided you define yourself as a Muslim, that's what a Muslim is in a sense. Full stop, right? So there's no although we accept orthodoxy, we actually challenge orthodoxy in many respects, and we believe that orthodoxy is partly, not largely responsible for the mess that we are in. So, for example, we are not Sufis, but we accept Sufism and we critique it. Right? Some of us are not Sunnis, but we accept Sunnism and we critique it. Some of us are, Smileys. We accept Smileys, but we also critique. There's a lot of self-criticism and lots of criticism of other varieties. So that's the first thing. That diversity of Islam and diversity of Muslimness is essential to what we mean. Like this is the only way of understanding what it means to be Muslim in the 21st century. That's the first thing. The second thing, we don't accept the fact that being Muslim means you are in a ghetto. So yesterday, Stefano, who works on Islam and science and social science, and who's done some work on my early work on this subject, was very astonished that I'm talking about post-normal science. He said, "What happened to?" He raised the question in the meeting, "What happened to the Ziauddin Sardar AUI who only talked about Islam and science?" Um, because by definition, a Muslim is somebody who embraces the word. So there's nothing that is outside of our privy. We critique everything, beginning with ourselves and our own Muslim communities. We critique everything, right? We are not a intellectual ghetto, right? So things that people may think that are not relevant to Muslims, we think they are definitely relevant, right? So like 10, 20 years when I was doing futures, people were saying, you're a kafir because future is the domain of God, right? It is rubbish, right? Unless you have some understanding of future, you are not even going to survive as Muslims, as we see in Gaza, right? If you just look at forget about the genocide, just look at for a second the planning that the Israelis implemented, right, for 20, 30 years. I mean, think of how much planning, future thought they gave to the idea of uh, 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 the pages exploding and how long they kept all that intact till such time they had to use it in that sense, right? What normally happens is that people who are victims, they get encircled just managing crisis, never have the time to step back. So part of what we are arguing is there are certain disciplines, no matter what other Muslims we think, we must engage with those disciplines because they are what Al-Ghazali calls socially requisite, right? If, for example, you do not have a doctor in a community, then the whole community suffers. If you do not have an engineer in a community, the community cannot build a bridge across the river and go across. If the community doesn't have psychologists, it cannot do much about mental health. Similarly, if a community does not have a futurist of people who are thinking about the future of the community and where it is going, where you will be in 10 years' time, or what hurdles are coming towards the direction, the community will suffer. So it's a shortly requisite knowledge. Um, so therefore, we cover all topics. So if you look at back issues of CN, where who's going to latest copy down there, you'll see come the speed there. There is some of the topics you have covered. Yeah, uh, humor, world order, bodies, evil, uh, sex, and men in Islam. This is interesting. The issue of men in Islam is very important because normally what would happen in any Muslim journal, Muslim organization, the men will talk about women in Islam. So we said, no, that's not us. So we got women to talk about men in Islam. So this issue is mostly about, although I had to write the introduction, but mostly about women talking about men, with some men talking about how bad they are in journal, right? So, here we know mixes. Yeah. So we have Mauritius and Andalusia. So we kind of do three subjects in one country, but we don't always manage to do it. So, for example, we had a very good look at Syria. We have done the issue in the Maghreb. Which is a brilliant article on Morocco by Robin Yassin Kassab, who was our deputy editor. We've done an issue on virus when it was coming along. We've done an issue on artificial AI and all that. So as far as we are concerned, as Muslims, we have a duty to look at everything in the world and had our own pluralistic, inclusive perspective on that. It's interesting that for example, artificial intelligence, we had one Sunni guy writing and he had a totally different perspective from a Shia guy, right? So there is a vast amount of diversity in opinion. The important thing for us is to question each other and critique each other and be open to everything. So that's what really the Muslims is about. And I said,
We say so critique or criticize. So
critical. We just call it critic. I mean, it's a critic in a sense that we are critics but we are not critics in the Western sense of being denigrating people. We don't do we do so there, but we don't kind of denigrate, or we don't aim to criticize people so that they are destroyed in the sense. Right? We tend to criticize people so they could become better and enhanced in a sense.
But I don't think it's about criticism at all. I think critical in the way that we understand criticism. I'm just looking at, we had this argument right now about critical thinking at this meeting. And I think predominantly it's understood as something that's like, so we said like, well, what do people mean by critical thinking? Because it's part of what we do at a liberal arts institution. And
Not necessarily.
the idea is that, so it's about questioning, analyzing, interpreting, evaluating, and making the judgments. I think question of criticality from the Greek word krusis is like when there's a space in the middle, like a crack, right? So you kind of try to, different opinions, contrast, you kind of try to you kind of open the space. So instead of bridging the crack, you kind of, which is not to say you create discord, but you try to understand what's in between. That she it's maybe different. Like something else, like some assumption that was made that only got taken in one direction, but could those assumptions taken into other directions? So it's sort of you unpack something that's been closed. So you open it up and say, oh, actually, there's so many possibilities. So I think that's what, like, for me, critique means, and the word comes more from critique than from criticism. It's just criticism, or critique being that thing which allows for an opening to read the opening where there was something closed.
And to understand the other as well.
Exactly.
Because you need, now I'm taking up students, we need the kind of methodology.
Yeah, but it begins with oneself, that exactly. Yeah, but I think what Doctor is saying, like, it begins with the self, right?
It's a dig in the sepals. Yeah, but yeah. That the problem here with teaching critical theory or critical thinking is that if you use textbooks, that they are closed things. So the first thing you need to confront is the textbooks themselves, and this is happening more and more, right? So this lady here had about one textbook, like it was disaster. She disagreed with everything because it was, I can't remember what textbooks you were talking about. Remember? But I've approached many students, but really come to me and say, this is what I'm being taught, that this is horrible stuff, right? And then we sit down and analyze and all that. So there's a kind of catch-22. People who are teaching critical thinking are teaching it by using standard text, Foucault and this, Derrida and what have you. And they end up perpetuating what is supposed to not be perpetuated.
So then critique, they put closer to critique than criticism.
Sorry?
Because criticism is more judgmental, placing the blame on the...
No, this is not about, this is exactly what I'm saying. It's not about judgmental. It's not about it's about enhancing what you are developing a better understanding of what you are talking about, right? Or what the subject is.
To just clarify about terminology here. We'll just try to make difference between terminologies. So critique, criticism.
If I understand, if I can jump in, if I understand it correctly, the way that you use the term critical is a kind of 19th century in contradistinction with the term dogmatism. So it's against being dogmatic, against accepting any type of idea
As final.
yeah, final, unquestionable, yeah, something like this.
Yeah, you open up something that has been polished. That's critique, right?
Well, should I start reacting or yes, we just maybe back? Yeah. Okay.
So thank you so much. I really enjoyed what you had to say. I just have only 2 or 3 points. The first point is related to what has been written by Mohammed Arkun.
Yes.
Islamology.
Yeah.
I think
we use his idea of the unthought.
Yes,
Exactly what you said.
very well with your work of Harpoon and thinking Islam. So the session take in uh, it refers to the three C's, that you evoked, and there is a big C, which is the capitalism. That three C's are ultimately very much connected with structural factors that connect with capitalism, and that beyond the culturalist interpretation, there is a structuralist, and it is about politics. It is about in relationships are where all of these C's are in a way uh, trying to swim. And um, so the third is that uh, in very often I think I have become gradually very not satisfied and unhappy with what I call culturalism. When uh, and I even tried to take part it in Arabic, ثقافانية in Arabic. Otherwise, that everything sort of re- revolves in our the culture. Uh, so I think this is why it is important, and it's necessary. It has become the paradigm that explains basically everything about our societies as model societies. Okay. How do we go beyond this culturalism that embedded in these types of edicts?
Okay, to the third point, I need to elaborate a bit more. Let's deal with the first. Okay. So yes, Al-Kuhl has influenced our thought. There is no doubt about it. His idea of the unthought, we made it part of post-normatized state. So if I were to develop it further, take to in a deeper level, the unthought will come in a sense. One of the unthought, for example, you mentioned capitalism. One of the unthought is that there is no alternative to capitalism. Famous economists and futurists who have this famous quote that it's easier to think of the end of the world than to think of the end of capitalism. You should Google that. It doesn't exist. And yes, but the three C's are essentially about change. So you can't bring capitalism in it. The three C's focus on change. This is a theory of change, right? Now, uh, 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 and it's not just capitalism being it's kind of the the mad technocratic world. Is the structure of the global post Bretton Woods structure, right? Is postmodernism, is a lot of Western philosophy, right? So it's much more than just capitalism that is changing and is changing, right? Uh, I mean, every time something happens, culture isn't a good example. Every time something happens in New York and California, we embrace it uncritically, right? Somebody goes there and he studies Hegel. Then he comes and teaches Hegel in our universities for next 30 years, right? And nobody bothered Malik bin Nabi or Iqbal, great thinkers that we have. But this guy had a PhD from some Harvard or somewhere on Hegel, and he's teaching Hegel for 30 years. So it's not just capitalism is essential, of course. So the three C's are about change. Capitalism is an institution or a structure or a mental construct or economic system, a number of different things, like consumerism, uh, even its technology. Right? So what the three C's focus is how the change is going to occur, and where are you going to potentially find chaotic events, and you need to prepare for that as Muslim societies, and how you navigate your way out, right? Because there are no solutions. It's all about navigation now. There are no super lot complex solution, because complexity requires, as I was saying, complex approaches, and that makes it life very, very difficult. So that's the first thing about three C's and and cool. Now, culturism, I do agree with you. Again, it's a bit of fad, like we had postmodern, suddenly postmodern became a global thing. Culturism has become a global thing in the last 15 years. Everything is culture, everything is culture. And of course, even people are arguing, and this guy, I don't know whether he's studied or not, he will confirm even science is culture, right? And become very good thing. There are several books with title Science as Culture. One is written by Robert Young, I think. So that culturism is a type, in my opinion, essentially the desire of Western intellectuals and academia to reduce everything to a single equation. You know, the greatest thing that in science supposed to be a single equation that you write on your t-shirt, that is the theory of everything, right? And we have that approach to theory of everything in social sciences. We have approach in culture studies almost everywhere, and culture is part of that kind of genre, and therefore we should reject it. And I am so glad that you're feeling, because that means you're thinking about it and you're saying, hang on, there's something wrong here.
Like what's for me is also destabilizing the fact that this culturalism is appropriated by people from, for example, I can hear it Moroccan.
Yeah.
It's not just a Western culture.
No. This is what the fight is that anything that happens in the Western academia is immediately embraced here, right? In a big way. So, for example, I will give you an example in Morocco. For me, Malik bin Nabi is a better and deeper thinker than Edward Said. Yeah. Malik bin Nabi was talking a form of Orientalism in the 50s, while Edward Said published his book, The Singtan My Science Technology Development, came out something like 74, 25. Yeah, okay. Like 20 years later. Okay. Now, Said just entrenched the whole thing in Western literary text and Western literary culture, while Malik bin Nabi looked at civilization and society in a much broader sense and argued why is that the certain kind of knowledge, right, subsumes us. Why we have developed the notion of colonizability. Why are we in a position where we can be colonized, right? So he was not just talking about one structure of knowledge as say, but in a much more profound way. How many people study Ali bin Nabi in any upper university? What about say every fucking university in the Muslim world, we teach you say till your death, right? Absolutely right. There are at least 3 or 4 Muslim scholars who did more profound work than Said in the whole notion of Orientalism. One is A.L. Tibawi. A.L. Tibawi wrote a book, English-speaking Orientalists, 1962 or something, right? Syrian scholar, brilliant scholar. Did a devastating critique of Van Berman, Sharks, Gilliam, the translation. If you look at Tibawi's analysis of Gilliam's life of Muhammad, is absolutely brilliant, genius level critique. Like goes to show how he translated certain words to show the prop in a bad light, how he introduced certain things which were not in the original text, and so on and so forth. Right. To this day, including me, you use William's translation of Life of Muhammad, because that's the only one available. All right. So I'm guilty as well. Please. Okay. Then there's Hussain al-Attas in Kuala Lumpur, who wrote The Myth of Lazy Relatives, came out 10 years before Orientalism in 1967, where he deconstructed all that, right? We don't teach A.L. Tibawi. We don't remember the Tibawi. That poor man died in England. I think he had got died crossing the road or some people. Hussain al-Attas died 2 or 3 years ago. Even in Kuala Lumpur, he is not. You do in Malaysia, he's not. It's hardly studied, right? But say the Foucault and Teresa, we shut down. We shut down our spiritual. We just go mad. So it's not their fault. It is our fault that we do not appreciate right? Again, I read a book called A Person of Pakistani Origin. So it came out in England as Person of Pakistani Origins. Basically, stories of my family, right? It's the stories of my grandfather, funny stories about, and it shows their complex character and their genius. And my sort of Sufi uncle who had this thick, who lived in Karachi, who could disappear, right? You're standing there, you're talking to him, and you turn around, you turn back, he's gone, right? So there's a story about how I discovered how does he make himself disappear, right? And he's a real character. I said, this is his grave. You can visit his grave in Karachi. And it's a real book. So in India, they said we can't publish this book because it says it's a person of Pakistani origins because we are anti-Pakistan, but we love it. So they changed the title to The Ways of Being Desi. All right, that's the title. That's the title. Published by Penguin India. Ways of Being Desi. And the word Desi means local or traditional. Right. In Pakistan, Desi by definition is inferior. In India, Desi by definition is inferior. Right. Because even who came from Paris, and that's, came from Morocco, so we put a holies. Right?
The same thing applied with the idea Khatibi and that Muhammad Abid Jadari, all the great guys.
Yeah. So the problem is us. We do not appreciate our own intellectuals, our own scholars, and we kind of bow down to the West, right? In a sense. Just a slight joke. In the 70s, 80s, when AIDS was playing very big. I used to edit a magazine called Inquiry, which was financed by Iran. The mullah came from Iran, right? And he brought a bag of money, which is good. We need the money, probably the magazine and all that. And then one day he said to me, nobody's around and must ask me a very important question. But he said, what is this AIDS? He said, AIDS is, it's a disease, sexually transmitted disease. You're getting it. But most is associated with homosexual. He says, but Alhamdulillah, the Western peoples, they ruin everything. And the BB practically, Romesh accurately, come for centuries. It's very heavy, the homosexual. I've been there, right? It's a bit like that, we and this is what we're trying to do in critical history. So, for example, we had this feminist first wave feminism, second wave feminism, third wave bloody feminism, and we have number of Muslim feminists in our gang, progressive, right? So we said, okay, you think you discover feminism? We didn't hear it, right? We got it. There we got to write about feminism. We thought it's a mind-blowing piece. They all say, "Oh, we didn't know that." Of course, you didn't know that because you don't read our stuff. You don't read in Arabic. You read Marx. You read Susan Abak or Gloria, whatever her name is, right? And Germaine Gear. If you read in Arabic, you will discover something different. Because my son is a philosopher. So his first degree is in philosophy. His master's in philosophy. They got first in philosophy, which is very rare. We got distinction in the master, and his PhD is in philosophy. Totally utter philosopher. And for 6 or 7 years, he stopped talking to me because every time he talked about, some Western philosopher, I had a critique, and he was, of course, learning about it. And so he went through this phase where he was a Marxist, then he was a postmodernist, then he was, blah, 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 blah. So he read Heidegger's On Being. And he came and said to me, Dad, I looked at this and he's okay, but this guy was a fascist, right? And so I said, okay, I give you another book called On Being, on the condition that you read it, begin to read, right? Ziauddin Sardar's On Being. So read this, right? And his mind was blown. So why didn't she show me this before? I said, because every time he pushed a Muslim philosopher towards you, you rejected it because you automatically assumed that what you are learning is superior. And actually, I wanted him to learn that so that he knows now, right? He doesn't want to go and teach in university because he says, I don't want to perpetuate this. So the depth and width of our own culture, of all classics, is so vast. It's like an ocean, right? And we, on the whole, don't even dip. We have not even dipped kind of over toe in it, in a sense, right? And unless we start looking at our own scholars, our own intellectuals, and developing our own disciplines, right? Why should we teach anthropology, for example, or why should we bother teaching culture studies in schools? Why do we, or women's studies, or feminist studies? We can develop alternative disciplines, for our, based on our own tradition and our own culture and what we think we need in the 21st century.
So, in your opinion, is the kind of the idea of Judaization of Islam is what can actually make us return and read all the books that we have, and also create a more identity based working rather than being very busy and relying on each other and focusing on our differentiations. By saying that, for example, what is the relation between a Muslim Sunni in Mauritania and the Muslim Sunni in Lebanon? Actually, nothing if you measure it from the culture side. Yeah. But if we manage to create this vast identity of being a Muslim and that's it, whether you are practicing and non-practicing with all the differences, and focus more on enhancing, is it this what can save us from being overly dominated by the Westerns or not?
But I don't know whether it can save us by overly dominating Western, but can certainly save us from ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. If I say to him, you are a Sufi and therefore I don't like you, right? Which many people do, by the way. You go to Saudi Arabia, that's exactly what they tell you. Right. Or you are Iranian Shia and I don't like you. There's not going to be much, Muslimness or togetherness, right? The first thing I have to say, you may be different, but you are part of me, right? Right. I mean, there's a movement in Malaysia, and they actually succeeded to ban Shias, right? And they asked me, I was in a public gathering, and I said, you people are mad, right? You are mad for one very good reason. You cut your own intellectual culture heritage, sliced it. You know how many of our great scholars that's supposed to be reading from Zohar-Wardi to Jami to Mullah Sadra to absolutely they were Shia, right? So what you are saying is that your own heritage is irrelevant to you by saying that Shiaism should not be allowed in Malaysia. Unfortunately, I lost. I mean, I won the debate, but they succeeded. So the Shiaism apparently you can't be a Shia in Malaysia, right? I mean, it's mad. That's what reality is, right? And how the Muslims, how the Ahmadis, for example, be persecuted in Pakistan. Even the our greatest scientist in Pakistan, Abdul Salam, was Ahmadi, and how he was, persecuted in his own country and was much better off outside, because they simply had a different interpretation of Islam, right? Uh, uh, my approach is the if all Muslims have a sacred text called the Quran, and if the Quran by definition is eternal, then it will have almost eternal interpretation. And there will be different people with different interpretations of how to live by its teachings. Right. And all of them, in my opinion, should be respected and valid. As a Sunni, if somebody who's thought about it, I actually reject the notion of imamah. But I profoundly embrace Shiaism and Shia folks, just as I'm not a Sufi, but I would really appreciate, what Ibn Arabi or Rumi have done, right? I read it all the time, but in a sense, because I see that as part of me. Ismailism is part of me, right? All of these different varieties of Islam are essential to me. They make me the Muslim that I am. And in 21st century, I really need to be a diverse, inclusive person to actually survive because diversity is the essence of survival in a complex society. The ability to adjust comes from appreciating diversity and embracing diverse ideas and thought.
So, if you have, for example, this would be a safe space to talk about critical Islam, like critical Muslim, right? For example, a masjid might not be a safe space to talk about much can happen that. But what I would like to know is, coming from Pakistan, I found that in some ways Pakistan has been pretty relaxed in terms of being critical about Muslims, about Shia Sunni. But I felt like in Morocco it was a bit more conserved, and the history is not that far because the I want both colonies and both liberative. Yes, but the for example, I was looking into the diminishing Shiite religion in Morocco. For example, it is very sudden. It's not very old. It's a very just like Malaysia. I think it's a very sudden concept. It's not a fun. But for example, can I call you is it a project? Let's or you can call yeah. So have theologians ever taken part in this? Yeah.
Yeah. The Muslim Institute that I could be that we formed in 1972, 73, and I got kicked out. So then it came back to me in 2009. The current chair is a mufti.
Oh, okay.
Back to that.
Mm.
So we don't. I mean, we've had one or two Salafi type people writing for us, right? And some conservatives do come to our discussions and Muslim Institute gathering because it's an open space for very deep discussion about differences, and you can just lay your things out. Shape nobody is going to do anything here or anything here. But on the whole, most conservatives will run away from this type of discussion, which is part of our problem.
That's true.
Yeah.
May I react to your
Yeah.
about Shia?
Yeah, okay.
And this is what brings me to the previous remark that while that there is a politics and political dimension that is important here to think about these issues as well. So, for example, I was once invited to give a talk with the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, and I warned them that I will be critical. So that's so. For example, when we speak about deal open to other religious
Experience.
Judaism, or at the same time, we are not we do not accept diversity when it comes to Shia. And I remember at some point, number of Shia schools were being closed. So this is a political dimension, and I think it's very important. I have to just mention that. But just one point, and probably one nuance in terms of what you have been talking about, which is philosophical in nature and historical also. And Muhammad Abid Jabri makes reference to this, is that knowledge, it would be misleading to think that knowledge belongs to a particular culture. So the very idea of Western knowledge or Islamic knowledge for me is problematic, because from a warm historical point of view, knowledge is about a series of interactions and give and take and dynamic kind of interactions, because Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi interacted with the Greek philosophy, and the Renaissance interacted with Muslim philosophers. And this is really the essence of knowledge. It does not belong to a particular culture, but it's the product of dynamic interactions, so that we don't fall back on some form of ethnocentric conception of what knowledge is about. So how do you react?
So the answer is yes and no. The answer is yes and no. Yeah, it is. What you say is partly correct, but I think the word has changed radically. So it's not, for example, we do law. I mean, say, what about anthropological? So what about the knowledge? I come and study you. and then generate knowledge how to manage and control you. Are you going to be happy with that knowledge?
No, I mean that.
Yeah, I said knowledge. I published half a dozen paper in this field. I'm giving you a scenario. I published half a dozen in people. I come, studied you, and I'm convinced I know how I can manage and control you, how I can manipulate your mind, right? And this established knowledge. It will be in textbooks within 5-6 years. You accept that or not?
But this applied to any form of knowledge, but
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It does not apply to any form of knowledge. No. So if so the knowledge, for example, classical physics, somebody here teaches classical physics, right? It doesn't apply to classical physics, right? When people came and said to me, "Oh no, this is all Western," gravity. I think Stefano was there. I said, "Okay, jump out a window and see gravity works or not." Right? So it doesn't. So the world is much more complex, and you have to differentiate, right? And the whole structure of epistemology is changing, right? I have a paper on this published about 3-4 years ago. I shall dig it out and send it to you to show how, in fact, the very fabric structure epistemology is changing, and what constitutes knowledge and what are they constitute knowledge is the rapidly transforming is, and so we had to be much more careful. So the knowledge of how to, and this is also established, that the knowledge of how to systematically displace a community and demonize it and dehumanize it and commit genocide and convince the world that it's not genocide. Would you accept that knowledge? That is knowledge, right? It's published knowledge, and you can acquire it even on the internet. But I can give you text from British military and various places that actually have it. Do you accept that knowledge?
let me clarify what you mean.
Yeah.
My stance to any form of knowledge that is produced is to be critical vis-a-vis. So otherwise, dogmas can be produced and from within Islamic form of knowledge. As the ultimate, I agree, equally produced within quote unquote Western form of knowledge, and that our critical engagement, as you suggested, basically applies in both ways.
Yeah.
But it's not just our critical engagement, but our appropriation of knowledge can also be that way. Otherwise, there are different forms of knowledge that you can
When I was a science journalist, I was working on a story about technology that was specifically developed to Zika, right? Very specifically. And the reason was that there were lots of riots in Northern Ireland. And the military wanted to know how can we stop the riot without killing too many people or not killing anybody, right? So the theory was developed that what you need to do, if the crowd is moving, protest is coming along, what you need to do is to identify who the leader is and who are the 4 or 5 main proponents of moving crowd. And then you use 5 bullets to their kneecaps. Right? This is exactly what happened. They developed the technology, they used it, and many riots were there. Which I published a story on because our technology was developed this part a bit as a science journalist. Now, is that knowledge acceptable to you? Because it's very, solid, physically grounded. Are there ethical principles in that knowledge that disturb you? It disturbed me when I was doing the story, right? But would you accept that as universally applicable to everybody? Would you buy it? Would you buy? Actually, they sold it to Saudis. Saudis never used it, by the way. They sold it to Saudis because there are no rights in Saudi Arabia. Why they buy it? So of course, in cakes, right? At the same time, this I did a story for New Scientist. It's a cover story. The cover line is the king, the king, something else, and the iceberg. So at the same time, they sold this technology to Saudi Arabia. They sold that iceberg to Saudi Arabia. The iceberg is going to come all the way from Arctic to Saudi Arabia to generate fresh water. By the way, it got there invented by it got happened. That it didn't occur to it. And they sold sand to Saudi Arabia because they said the Saudi sand was not good enough for Western beaches. And it's all that is in that story. That if you look back at it's about 30 years ago, for a long time ago, and I did that. So I don't buy that all knowledge is knowledge and it's good.
No, and it's
I'll say something.
Yes.
What I understood from my colleague, she said that maybe the knowledge is the result of dynamic consumption first, that is changes on the side, and that is a combination of different sources of knowledge. Whoever is producing the knowledge is really contrasting different sources, Arab, Persian, Roman, Greek, etc., to produce like something new that we are not supposed to accept or reject. We can accept to reject some, but at the end, we are producing something new that is resulting from combination of multiple sources. This is what I got, and this is acceptable to me. To so
Yes, I would argue that view is out of date now. The contemporary postmodern world does not. Uh, you will not serve yourself very well if you have that perspective of knowing. Knowledge now is knowledge now is Dathanized. See, yesterday I showed there are dozens of books which showed mathematics has been weaponized, right? Anthropology is weaponized, sociology is weaponized. Now, just look at it. You know, what is anthropology? Anthropology is a science developed specifically at that specific moment in Western imperialism to understand how they can manage and control the natives. What is sociology? Is a particular form of knowledge developed in the West, particularly in Britain and France, how to control the poor and the working class. Right? The poor law, the criminal law, they all came out of sociology. The criminal law was the best thing to do for the criminals is to send them to Australia, which is exactly what they did. Right? That was the early sociological studies. Right? So these disciplines are very specifically oriented towards doing certain things because they emerge out of certain needs that need to be fulfilled in that society, right?
but if you will pick up, for example, the example of anthropology.
Yeah,
Yes, totally. It's the product in theory context, and we cannot understand anthropology unless we look at it from that context. But there were critical engagement with the Western anthropology by Talal Asad, by James Clifford, by Milley. And also there was a sort of reaction, for example, in Morocco, there is a anthropologists who have been very critical of the colonial and European paradigm, how to think about Moroccan society. There is, of course, not just a rejection of anthropology as a discipline, but a critique of anthropology and thinking about alternative forms of knowledge from within
the exactly. The last words are very important. From within the same paradigms which created the original anthropology. That's the point. That's the point. And so you should take Talal Asad, who is absolutely brilliant. Why is he an anthropologist? Because a guy spent 20, 30 years getting a PhD in anthropology. Now he's going to defend anthropology, but he's so brilliant, so clever, right, that he basically undermines the whole discipline. If you read the book like Genealogy of Religion or his stuff on secularism, I think it's not really anthropology. It's an original mind reflecting on secularism. It's an original mind reflecting on what religion means in history, right? But because he did anthropology, he's kind of bracketed as an anthropologist. In contemporary times, 80% to 85% of all people who get a degree in anthropology in Western institutions, in a European university, work for corporations. Do you know what they teach the corporations? Right? For example, I give you an example which I investigated myself. Teach, for example, in Malaysia, the anthropologists researched and told McDonald's what kind of burgers will the Malays eat. Right? In South Africa, a very famous study, you can find out, dig it out, that they thought a particular corporation that the blood from the local tribe has certain qualities that cannot be found in another human being. So what we need to do is to get the blood from these people, which is exactly what they did. It's a very famous exploit of that. The most well-known anthropologist in the world, Margaret Mead, talked about growing up in Soma, about sexuality of non-Western cultures, and she fabricated everything. Everything was fabricated. That book was taught in every Muslim university for 30 years before one of our students exposed that everything in the Margaret Mead dip was right. So we're talking about a discipline that is deeply rooted in imperialism. Why can't you, incredibly clever and wonderful people, right, who understand the world, develop a discipline that's got nothing to do with anthropology, but studies you as an acceptable manner in as humane societies or whatever. Why do you have to go and still rely on Jack Goody or whoever the great anthropologists are?
For example, in Morocco, the topologist like Hassan Rashid.
I don't know him.
Yes, that's okay. But he has been working as an anthropologist to inform the Moroccan state about how to think of new form of development in Morocco.
Right.
How to think about place of tribal societies. You see, so I think there are ways by which you create, and he has been very critical of French colonial vulgate as associated with the French. This is what I have behind. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the example here is that in the 70s and the 80s, it was thought that the Western capitalist economic system was very bad for Islam, for Muslim societies, and there should be Islamic economics, right? And the argument was that we criticize that, right? But we use whatever it is. So a very brilliant guy called Ziauddin Sardar, who is the Indian Aligarh University product, developed the original book. It's called Islamic Science Media Synthesis. This came out in 1976. I used to work in Jeddah, and there's a Islamic economic conference. The first Islamic conference took place in Makkah in 1976. Huge work of conference. This man devoted his entire life to working with Islamic economics. He died last year, right? 3-4 years ago, I contacted him because we used to, he was a King Abdulaziz University, I was a King Abdulaziz University, so we met in we were friends like. But I said, Najat bhai, now that you're reaching the end of your life, you spend your entire life writing about Islamic economics. You really like upper 100 technical paper, keep 100 book by hand. What is your grand summary? You should do a piece, an autobiography piece, not about you as much, but about how you develop a discipline and all that. She sent me the article which we have published, which will be get out in critical mass. And the last sentence was that we have worked with Islamic economics, we have worked and tirelessly for last 50 years to rediscover capitalism using the Sharia. That was the last sentence of his piece, the conclusion of his life. I rang him, he could hardly speak. I said, I'm going to cut that sentence up because it undermines what you've been doing. He says, you would do no such thing. That is my conclusion. I have wasted my life because discipline I want to create was subsumed and domesticated by the dominant economic system, which is again what capital and the poverty, right? This guy is wonderful. He is very clever, but unless you get out of the paradigm will put up. Get out of the paradigm. But sometimes you can get out of the paradigm and we still have the same labor. So we need to do justice to the man. He may still call himself anthropologist, and other people may call him anthropologist, but he's destroyed the system so much that he's created a new paradigm of his own. But we don't know, in a sense. So we got.
I think I really admires his idea as an
So I was the only person in 1976 when I went to the study where I said, this is wrong. They're talking about You see, when I was studying, I did my first degree is in physics. My second degree is in information science, which in those days, I mean, it's part gravity science, part cybernetics, this space kind of thing, right? My master's. So I was looking at classification schemes. So one of the first books I wrote was called Islam Outline a Classification Scheme. Because I thought the whole knowledge system was fucked up against us. Right? When I go and look at the book on Islam, you get millions of Christianity, right? And there are 3 texts on Islam, and Islam is, 39.1134. Islam is the culture, civilization. We, around for 1500 years, and that's what we get in the dominant coding classification or Lively or Congress classification. So I did my own, and the book is still available somewhere. It's called Islam or less. It's a new classification of knowledge. 2 places in the world use it. One is the Islamic, the religious ministry library in Kuala Lumpur. They use my system, and a private lecture. An old friend of mine in Saudi Arabia was a huge library, so he uses my system. So apart from that, nobody else has used it. But lots of people have written about it. Like, so we are at the bottom of knowledge structure. Yeah. Right. Almost every discipline is racialized to exclude us. I don't know who sent it. Yesterday I did the lecture, and today a student sent a thing that AI was asked to judge a beauty contest, and he eliminated all the people who were black and gray skin. Student sent that today to me. Very interesting. Right? So we are in a totally different world, right? And I think here we have to be very ruthless, right? And very, very ruthless. It's not in terms of knowledge structures and all that. Very, very careful of what we are teaching our students, how we are preparing them, because there's some real dangers. I mean, as I said, 40% of members of parliament in the European Parliament are fascist. Right? Right? We know what the last fascism did. We know what current fascism is doing in Gaza. We know what fascism in India is doing to the Muslims. You have to prepare them in a big day, right? So the dangers are very real. It's not just fascism, it's how technology is moving, how knowledge is being racialized, how disciplines are being weaponized, right? In a sense. Now, the whole idea of post-normal times gives you an opportunity to create your way paradox.
What you're talking about reminds me of an image that I think I saw a few weeks ago called the Tree of Knowledge. I don't know if you have. No, it's a wonderful. Yeah, it captures exactly what you're saying. The names and that are specifically from within Islamic. It's called the Tree of All. Please find it, send it to me. Yeah, I'm. If I find this, I will send. Yeah, yeah.
Where's that?
Yeah, the Tree of Knowledge. Yeah, and it does not, of course, it's from within. Yes.
But I think we are living in shifted times now. We are abandoning our old practices to shift to new things rapidly. So we are not only having time to analyze as we either back, not enough time to analyze and
Exactly. Now we know that.
make decisions. No
Now we bring so fast.
decisions only are adults analyzing anything.
But the important thing now is that it's even more liker for us to decide what we do not want to change. Since everything is changing, but we don't want everything to change. There's certain things we value, we do not want them to change. So we got to also focus on what we do not want to change. Right? Right. And for example, we do not want to change the idea of compassion, of zakat, right? But it be very, or the idea of what, right? How we preserve it, right? So how do we, because change is accelerating, these ideas can be swept aside. People who come and tell works are invalid, need to create corporations. Corporations bring you money.
So now the challenge is how to preserve.
How to preserve what you want to preserve.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at the
So model biases.
exactly. Exactly, you can normalize.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have just sorry, no, that was an interesting discussion. So just a quick question. You mentioned something big, and I'm kind of confused a little bit about. So you mentioned so the idea of different kinds of Muslims.
Yeah.
And it's a little curious statement because it can mean a lot of things. So can you maybe just elaborate on what you mean by kinds of Muslims? Because you can have physicists and there are physicists who drink coffee, physicists who don't drink coffee. But so it's a bit confused as to what. So what do you mean actually there's different kinds of Islam, or do you mean that the people who are actually Muslims are different kinds, which is an obvious statement or trivial statement? So I'm confused as to what does that mean? Basically, are you saying that
Islam is inclusive, big enough, then for different people to interpret it in different ways, right? So that's, I mean, the Shias, for example, have their own interpretation.
yeah, so okay, yeah, so do
Or Smileys have their own interpretation.
no, that's fine. So basically, you're saying so you're just saying so okay, so I mean this goes back to a little bit of discussion of realism and so if Islam is a thing, is it an external reality or no? That's the first statement. If it's external reality, then you just
What do you mean by Islam is an external reality? Spend me. But
no, that's my question to you actually, if you don't mind.
no, I'm asking you because you say Islam.
No, I know it's a question. So you know, because
So what you're saying is Islam a singly defined truth? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, so okay,
I don't understand what you
yeah. So the more basic statement is there an external reality or no? So what do you mean?
reality or
Is there an external reality or no? So when we make statements, are these statements actually, can we say in a certain sense they're actually true or no?
some statement will be true and some will not be true.
Yeah, exactly. So and that judgment is
How you examine them, and the truth will also be kind of in a say be prejudiced from your perspective.
so basically there's no external truth. Is that
And there is an external truth.
okay? So
There is an objective truth. Gravity, for example, is an external truth.
yeah. So okay. So yeah. I mean, this is what a little bit more. Yeah, I'm not sure if gravity was close. But anyway, so basically, my point is, so there's an external reality, and then you can make statements, and these statements either fall, match that reality, or no, right? And of course, there are conceptual things, and these are not judged by external reality. If I say, for example, if I say, you know, this thing is red, it's like either it is red, it's earlier.
So basically, what you're saying that Islam, like this thing is right. Islam is this and that is it.
You know, I don't. So
Else who says that this is not okay, so actually, I'm asking statement is not really Islamic or not very.
and that's what I'm asking. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just asking. So is it the same? Is it actually as an external reality? So it's defined by itself, and then either you match it or no, or is it the conceptual matter?
It's both.
I mean, it can't be both by definition. They're contradictory.
It can be both.
No. This is basically a logical statement.
The Quran is an external reality,
Okay, that's fine.
but it's also a conceptual interpretation.
Yes.
It's not.
No. So I think it's a little bit ambiguous statement. I mean, you can't say something.
I think it's actually. I'm telling you.
The distinction maybe is between an ontological claim and an epistemological one, and that's something you need to read Marx to understand that these things when trying to be.
To react to your point, by using if I ask you to describe this bottle,
If
but ask individuals here to describe the same bottle, which is a concrete reality objective,
no,
you will see different interpretations.
Our interpretation, but those are two different cases. This is that point. Okay, fine. But from that point, this is a good example.
Very quickly. So after the death of the Prophet, within 30 years, Muslims were fighting each other on interpretation. Now these people allegedly knew more about Islam than we do. Yeah. So they already had different interpretation. There were different sets already. Those who had observed the reality of the Prophet in a sense. So shall we say all of them were idiot? And they did not accept the external reality. I give you an example. The Faris al-Nadim.
What's his name?
Faris al-Nadim is the catalog of books. 11th century catalog of books in his library in Baghdad. Right? The first section on sex. Right? I mean, mind-bogglingly complex sex. Right? So all of that interpretation, all of that, he does not dismiss any of them. He says this is a part of Islam. They are
part, remember it is the Muslims. Sorry.
So you can, in a matter of speaking, is the Schrodinger cat
Is it that? No, it's not.
bad?
See, the Schrodinger cat is
Right.
that. What a lie. So I feel like you just make some prejudgment. I'm just asking a question. I feel like you assume what the answer is, which is not necessary. So just an example of say, so you said there's the bottle and descriptions are different, but description of the bottle is different from the bottle. The fact is there's a bottle. Yeah.
How we work with.
So for
Is that. Right? Reality is that.
no, exactly. So there's the bottle and the description of the bottle, and they can be multiple description. Now,
This is exactly what's happened to the Quran, because words carry different meanings, and and this is part of semiotic and linguistic theory. Yeah, there is always a difference between the signifier and the signified, in the sense that liberty might be something for you, but it's somebody, and justice might be something for you, but it's the same word that carries different.
Oh, the multi clip. Yeah, no, I had to satisfy, but just the point is that now
Scientists and engineers, they are not able to recognize
As of science, they also have had
it is fine. So my only point is that the bottle is different from the description of the bottle. You have different descriptions. Some of them match reality, some of them do not match. Imagine
most of the material.
No. Imagine, for example, there's a bottle, and let's say there's some external thing that we can define as a shape, and it's properly defined, people understand it. And someone say the shape of the bottle is spherical. Let's just say someone say the bottle is spherical. That's a description, but it's not a description of reality. It's a description of the bottle. It's a wrong description. They say someone said it has this shape. It is true. Someone says it has this color, which is both true. They're different descriptions from different perspectives. They're both true, but just in the they're completely wrong. So there's discussion of the object and discussion of the description. So maybe we say different kinds of Muslim. You're talking about description. Of course,
But not everything that we work with in our society is based just on hard objective. Because concepts and words have different meanings and negations, and how we interpret them depends.
so there's lots of different facts. Exactly. Just when people discuss, definition should be clear to avoid confusion. If you define Islam as what everyone can define, of course people can disagree. If you define Islam as experimental defined by this and that, then it is what it is, and then people can try to come with description and discuss whether the description actually match reality or no, whether they mismatch or they both different description that match. As you said in the example of the early part.
Arisha, where I'm working, 2 weeks ago, they passed a law. It's called Mufti law. Yeah, check it up, right?
So is the name Mufti?
Mufti law. It's called the Mufti law. I don't know why it's called the Mufti law. Why does it called Mufti law in Malaysia?
Now this how it's spelled?
Passed
MUFEI.
And you see, yeah, but the
Law.
law, oh, the law, yeah, that was last.
So they say that Malaysia is an Islamic society defined by as a Sunni, Ashari, and and one mazhab. I can't remember. It's not Malay, but Safi. So that's the definition of Muslim in Malaysia. If you are not, so my colleague went to a divorce court, right? And she had a witness with her, and the Qazi asked her, that's from the Muslim court. Qazi asked her, the witness, what mazhab are you? And she said, I'm Malaki. She came from Saudi Arabia or Kandahar. He said, we do not accept Malaki mazhab as a seller. Yeah. So your witness is irrelevant in the court. Cause the stir, right? But they passed the law anyway. Right? So that's then they are defining the bottle in such a way that there is no perspective on the bottle, right? That is it. Right? If you see a different, for example, if you see from that angle, you don't see Sidi Ali, right? And I see Sidi Ali and it says Sidi Ali is definitely written on the bottle. That is the truth, but you can't see it. You saying no, Sidi Ali is not written on the bottles and it's not blood and truth, right? And you bring out a dagger and a sword to start fighting with me because I'm saying I can see Sidi Ali written right there. You know, like, okay, so
personally, there's two. So my intent is very important. Exactly. So my point, just that the discussion is more oriented toward that fact. So we both see this model, and some say I see Sidi Ali, and some say I don't. Are they actually both right? Now, someone can come and say I see Sidi Hazm. There's no Sidi Hazm in there. But the discussion is more like which description match you use it. And then maybe different description that both match. They're different, but they both match. And another description actually doesn't match. So be both Malik and Shattari match, or someone who says in Islam Jesus is a god, that doesn't match in Islam.
So they can be different description, but they also be yeah. So that's something that I'd be yeah. So no, I didn't necessarily say put up on the script.
If you allow me a few seconds. Sorry, I'm busy. I want to take a picture with you at the book, please.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Wait. So, you're going to ask a question.
I would
Ask a lunch, right?